So we make sure we have everything for posting for those that can't make it tonight. And so I'll just start off with some opening remarks. This is really kind of informal. I don't think we need to really follow too much formality. The one thing we do request is that people who would like to speak, we're happy to promote you to speak. Just put your name and address so that we make sure we're dealing with people that everybody knows. We can have a conversation. You can ask questions. We'll respond as best we can. I could say not all questions are answered right now. We still are aiming at the fall to put this project in front of the town. And we've got a lot of work to do between now and then to have as many questions answered as possible. So we'll do our best to answer the questions we can. And then we'll go from there. It looks like we've got some people filing in now. Again, we don't really have a presentation. So we're really just wanted to have an informal discussion if people wanted to have some questions answered. So I have with me, for those, I'm sorry, I should introduce myself for those who may not know me. Mike Quinlan, I chair the School Building Committee here in town, as well as the Permanent Building Committee in town. I am a resident of Medfield for 14 years, and I have served on the Permanent Building Committee since 2011, and the SBC when it was formed in 2018. So, and with me tonight, I have the principal of the Dale Street School, Steve Grenham, which many of you probably already know, but Steve is here and he can answer a lot of the questions about school operations and the educational side of the equation. And then also with me tonight are Emily Grandstaff Rice and Tina Suhu from Arrow Street. They're with the architectural firm that is designing this beautiful project that you see behind me. And so that's the team we have. And again, not really, no real structure tonight, and we'll just sort of take things as they come, basically looking for questions from the group. And there's a Q&A. I'm happy to promote people to speak if they would like to. If they just want to post a question, we can try to answer that question. Again, I would just ask that you put your full name and address into the Q&A, and we'll go from there. So I will open it up if anybody wants to jump right in. It might take you a minute, I understand, to type in stuff, so we'll give a little bit of time. I guess people are shy today. Again, for those just popping in, we're really here just to answer questions. If people have questions that they'd like answered or addressed, just put your name and your address into the Q&A, or type in your full question and we can answer it verbally, or you can ask it. We can promote you to speak, whichever you prefer. Okay, I have a question from Marla Beck, 20 Pueblo Road. And Marla asks, how much debt will Medfield be taking on, and what would be the yearly estimate of payments will it cost the taxpayers? So we're still working out the fine details of all of that, but I can give you estimates right now. Our current estimate is that the town's share, and I should just remind people that we're in this together with the state, and the state is providing a share of the overall cost through the Mass School Building Authority. You'll hear the term MSBA thrown around a lot. The MSBA is our partner, and they partner with towns across the Commonwealth to help them finance projects and make sure that they're built according to good practices and standards, et cetera, both educationally and fiscally. So the MSBA invited us into their system in 2017. We've been working with them to sort of refine our project. We've been working with the community to refine our project. And our current estimate for the town's portion is 60 million out of a, I believe a 77 million. I think that was around the final number. I shouldn't say final, the last set of numbers. So the town's share would be approximately 60 million of that. There'd be about a 17 or 18 million dollar payment reimbursement from the state. And as we work out the final details, we'll be able to narrow that down more specifically. In terms of the impact on each individual taxpayer, that really depends on the house that you live in and its assessment. So if you live in a house that's worth $1 million, you're going to have a very different portion of a payment than someone who lives in a $500,000 assessed house. So it really kind of varies. The median assessed value in Medfield is $675,000. And right now we're estimating that that would amount to an $850 to $900 increase in the first year, and a diminishing over the course of a 30-year borrowing. Now that is just for this project. What we are looking at also is some other debt that's coming off the books from the high school project, my high school middle school project back in the early 2000s. That debt is coming off, which it does allow some of that to offset some of the increase from this. So we'll have final numbers of that for town meeting. So I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, by all means, put a follow-up and we'll try to address that. Would anyone else have any questions? Oh, I see. Thanks. I see Tim is here. We'll promote Tim. Just to give everybody a heads up, I'm promoting Tim Bonfatti, who is also on the school building committee with me and has been serving this town much longer than I have. Hey, Tim.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Tim.
So
Hi,
just
Steve.
to kind of recap, I know we've gotten a lot of people that have just entered sort of after my initial introduction. This is really informal, just meant to be able to have a dialogue, an informal dialogue with community members who are concerned about this project and what it may mean for them. And so if you have a question, just post it in the Q&A and we can be promoted to speak, or you can just ask the question via text form. Whichever you prefer, just put your name and address in the Q&A. So it does look like we have a follow-up from Marla. And the question is, if this does not pass, what is the alternative cost to fix Dale? Can Dale be added on to quote unquote work? So it's a little tricky the way I'll try to answer this the best I can, but it's not exactly as cut and dry. If this doesn't pass in the fall, the town has options about how it can proceed. It can choose to design and continue with a project, whether it be here or anywhere else in town on its own, which would be a tall order given the size of the state's reimbursement. The town could, let's say that the town, it's close. We need a 2/3 majority at town meeting to approve a debt exclusion. And if, let's say it's, 65% instead of 66.7%, we can choose to just revote it. That would have to be a revote of the exact same project, potentially maybe with a, we could reduce some things like the replacement field or something if cost might be an issue. That would be something that may sway a few voters to change their votes. The town, if it cannot do that quickly and get support for it, then the other option would be to resubmit a new statement of interest to the MSBA to kind of start the process over. The town could choose to renovate Dale on its own. The current estimate for that, just to bring it up to code, I believe was in the neighborhood of 37. Do you remember, Tina, what that number was for the base repair? You're muted. You're muted.
I'm muted.
Yeah.
I would have to look it up. I don't know have that number off the top of my head.
Look that up and we'll make sure we get that to Marla. But the base repair, just to kind of bring the current building with no room for expansion, would be in the neighborhood of $37 million, I believe. It was somewhere in the mid $30 million range.
Yeah, it's actually closer to 39 million.
Oh, well, there you go. Thanks for looking that up. So, and then that's just to bring the current facility up to current code. It would not allow us to have any sort of expansion or any new program whatsoever. It would just be, basically making it current code. And any future growth that may occur, we would have to add on to that. So again, as we start to do that all on our own, it becomes certainly a lot more expensive to the taxpayer than having the MSBA involved in it. Ideally, in my mind, the more we can keep the state's support with the town, the better it is for the taxpayers. We did look at an addition renovation to the existing Dale Street School. And for many reasons, it was not chosen as the best available option, which is why we have recommended that the new school be placed on the Wheelock site adjacent to the existing school. All right, next question I have here is from George Gallagher, 16 Carmen Circle. George has two questions for us this evening. First up, why, when plans were submitted to the state, was the size of the submission for Wheelock about 98,000 square feet, but the Dale Street submission was 115,000 square feet, a 17% larger proposal, which would of course result in a higher project cost? So, I mean, I'll defer some of that to the architects, but my understanding is that when you're working with the existing building, it's not the same as building a building from scratch. And there were definitely less efficient layouts because we're trying to cram spaces that are modern and modern classroom sizes that are that live up to current standards, don't necessarily fit in as smoothly into an existing building as they would a building from scratch, which necessitated it to be a larger footprint. Emily or Tina, do you have anything to add on that?
You said it correctly, that it's the inefficiency. So some of the existing spaces within the existing building are not configured proportionately correctly to meet the educational program. And so therefore some of those rooms might be a little bit larger in order to at least meet the minimum requirements. And also there's also a basement level that's part of the existing building that's going to have to be part of the renovation in terms of bringing it up to code, putting a slab that's not there now because currently it's a dirt floor in the basement, and then mechanical rooms as well. So, providing building system support for the existing building, but also the new addition.
And as well as speaking of the basement, hazardous material abatement is another key factor into why the overall cost for the ad reno was higher than a new building. That certainly factors in when we talk about renovating an existing building. So that's why you can't basically say that an ad reno and a new building should be the same square footage and still get the same result. All right, next question from George was, when an apples to apples comparison using per square foot cost as an equalizer is done, it's about 650 plus for Wheelock and about 550 for Dale. How can you continue to contend that Wheelock is the more cost-effective solution? Cost per square foot, again, is something that is easy to compare when you're comparing an apples to apples. So a new building to a new building would be a way to compare just the building itself. But a cost per square foot for an entire project includes site work, includes some other things, and that we've included as part of the WheeLock plan. In the grand scheme of things, in comparison to the ad reno scheme at Dale, the overall cost is higher. It may be lower on a per square foot basis, but it is higher. And I don't know that those numbers are entirely accurate, 650 versus 550. I don't know, Tina, if you have those PSR numbers, but because that's a much wider gap than I think we have reported. So I don't know where those numbers George got from, but I don't think they're accurate. So we look at these projects, and it's not just something that's about cost. It's not just completely about, what's the cheapest solution. We do factor in that, we're trying to be cost efficient, and we're not choosing the most expensive option, and we're not choosing the least expensive option. We're choosing the option that we think is the best fit from a cost and an educational benefit perspective. We have to keep reminding ourselves that we're building a school here. We're not building a strip mall or townhouses. This is something that has an effect on generations of kids. So we want to make sure we're making good decisions, and we feel like we've presented the best option. Is it the cheapest option? No, it's not. We're not contending that.
Mike, maybe to add to that, and I don't know these numbers that well, but I know based on our other projects, when we compare ad reno, the numbers you look at for construction don't include swing space, don't include sort of the impact costs of renovating a building over the course of, I don't know what this one is, but 3 or 4 years. So that might account for some of it, because clearly, obviously, if you do just comply, normally if you just apply, you are able to preserve a chunk of the building. So that should preserve some cost. But when you add in those extra overs is where that premium gets, or that cost difference gets used up.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point. Thanks, Tim. The phasing, obviously, when you're renovating a building that's occupied, it's not something that you can just vacate and then renovate without other impacts on, what do you do with the kids while that school is out of commission. So that's important to be part of that context. All right, next question I have is a follow-up from Marla. If the school does get built, have you done an analysis of any cost savings for yearly school budgets? What are the benefits of the budgets by having the schools on the same campus? So I'm going to defer to Steve on the benefits of being able to have grades 2 through 5 on a single campus. Steve's probably the best person to ask the educational-based questions. And then in terms of the school budgets, I don't know if we have the answer to that, because that's more of a Mike LaFrancesca thing. But Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about educationally why the Wheelock site makes sense?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And thanks for everybody for coming in tonight. I think we have been through this for, a better half of like a year and a half now, working with the teachers and working with Dr. Morrison. And I think what I would look at first is obviously starting with the student. Everything we do is student centered. So I think when we thought about the Wheelock site, we just felt that the building there could accommodate the different needs of the students. Obviously, as you may know, in schools now, you have a plethora of different learning styles. And I think that having a school, a current state-of-the-art school at that space could accommodate more in different needs. I think the other side of it too is that combined campus of a grade 2 through 5 is very helpful. So one of the things we do here in town, most people like having the 3 different schools, but the transitions can be difficult for kids. So having a 2 through 5 campus would be great, because already talking with, Holly Caulfield, the principal of Wheelock, if this does get built, the opportunities for, the mutual learning spaces that we would have there, if there were going to be assemblies that they had and they needed to use the gymnasium or any type of music situations that we have in the new building, it would just be great, and it would put them on that same campus. So for students with maybe a little bit of anxiety of, going over to a different school, it still would be a different school, but it would be right there on campus. It would be awesome. I think the other thing is, and we've really found this out through the pandemic, is that, the outdoor learning spaces and the stuff that, working with, Arrow Street and Left Field to look at the outdoor learning spaces have been incredible. Our teachers have done an amazing job this year of maximizing that and getting kids outside and getting a spot over by the Wheelock that adds so many different things, the walking trail that's there for our walking classrooms, the victory garden that we could be a part of, and the other thing where the water basin is, it just creates a lot of different things, not only for the 4 and 5 students, but I know that the Wheelock students would benefit that as well. And I think the last thing that I would say is, and again, the students have to come first, but as far as the adults and the educators, on the site, a lot of curriculums are written, 3 through 5. That's what we do. We do a lot of professional development meetings at all the elementary schools, and sometimes we break them apart, pre-K to 2. Sometimes we do 3 through 5. So to have the teachers 2 through 5 on one campus just allows us to have easier collaboration. It makes better professional development. And the other thought about it is when you have OTs, occupational therapists, physical therapists, a lot of those, educators that are very, very valuable to our district travel between multiple buildings. So to have, people like that really have a site that's very close together in the 2 through 5, yes, they would still be available for the Memorial School as well. But to have those educators that were able to transition between these 2 buildings, and not only to mention in state-of-the-art facilities that these kids deserve, would always be our preference. So I think when we built the educational plan, and again, with great help from Arrow Street, and also, we had community support, and we also had teacher support of what our educational plan would be, and design the building that way, and then figure out the best location for it to be. That all those reasons pointed to the Wheelock site, and it would benefit, our students and our staff.
Steve, talk to me a little bit about special ed. One of the things that I've actually had a resident who reached out to me and who has a child that has special needs, and she expressed her frustration with having to constantly be changing teams because they jump from Memorial over to Wheelock, back to Dale, and then over to the middle school. Like there's 3 transition points for that in a 5-year period. And for kids with special needs, she expressed how hard that was for them. But and the reason why she wanted to reach out to support the project was because the idea that some of those special ed teams could easily work with kids through a 4-year period. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I definitely do, Mike. And we've heard that as well. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that, the transitions are difficult. I think a lot of people in town like having the schools as they are. And there's a unique thing to be going through with the same students for your 5 years of elementary, or 6 years. But I would piggyback off that, Mike, and say that not only the special education students, but our regular ed students as well, have trouble with the anxiety of meetings. So the last couple summers, I have my incoming PIN night actually May 26th. And I always say to parents, I'm there all summer. I'll give your kids tours of the building and everything like that. But to answer your question, I think that the services and the collaboration for all of our teachers, but especially special education, because what we hear sometimes is we've had a plan and we've had some goals that we've been working on with a student. And when they go across town, there's not that collaboration, there's not that meeting time. So having a 2 through 5 campus, again, to have those certain speech and language, OT, PT, occupational physical therapy, kind of working with those kids in the same area through the same amount of time to see the growth. But it also would be helpful when you're having the teachers there to be able to go right next door and even display or model something that they have used to be effective with a student that was in 2 and 3, and then model and then continue that growing. Because ultimately, everybody on this committee, everybody in the community wants it to be in the best interest of kids. Kids are the center of everything that we do. So I think to have different conference rooms that are over there, to have different type of special education meeting rooms that we have over there, that could be shared, and the students at the Wheelock, if necessary, could use those spaces as well. So I think your point's a great one. I hear that often with transition, but not only from special education. It started there in my first couple years, but now it's even more broad. And again, nothing's going to be bigger than this year, where you have kids in 4th grade that still haven't been to Dale if they're in cohort D. So situations like if we had this new school and the pandemic had come before, it wouldn't be as much of a transition for them. So I think that can't be, it can't be understated, exactly what you're saying there.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, so next question I have is from Pat Casey, 29 South. Pat, if this is the same Pat, I think Pat served on the state hospital and committee and served this town well in that regard. So thanks for joining us, Pat. Can you remind us, the question is, can you remind us of the plan to repurpose of the existing Dale Street building, especially whether the building is expected to be fully utilized? So when we started this evaluation and we're looking at the possibility of moving the Dale Street School to Wheelock, we saw basically 3 options with the existing Dale Street School. It could be demolished. It could be mothballed, which is basically, kind of like just, closing the building and making it tight and secure, but not having a use for it at the time. Or we could find a reuse for it. And dating back for many years, one thing that's always been considered if this type of thing would occur with this project of moving the school, that we could potentially use the existing Dale Street School as a home base for the Parks and Rec facility. Our current recommendation, and it's not part of the SBC, it's the Permanent Building Committee, has taken that up, and we've started looking at what that may look like. But the current idea is that we could potentially, if this project is approved, move Parks and Rec into the existing Dale Street School at hopefully a minimal cost, if not too much upfront. And we're trying to do that without asking for additional funds. And that would solve some of their short-term space needs that they have, and get them out of a building that's quite frankly in worse shape than Dale, which is scary to think about. But the FAF Center is really, in my mind, sort of beyond its useful life. The Dale Street School, it seems to be a desire in town to maintain it. So I don't know that demo, at least not full demo, is something that the town wants to entertain. And I truly think it's an asset. I think it gives us some flexibility with the town's space needs. Parks and Rec being the most immediate one. And rather than proceeding down a path where they're looking to build a new building, we asked them if they'd be willing to consider, Parks and Rec in the Dale Street building as an option, and they fully support it. So we've asked them to sort of take a look at what that might look like, because they wouldn't need the whole building. So we would need to look at what other potential tenants could go in there. We are evaluating some other options. I know at least one of the selectmen wants to look at doing senior housing there. But that gets complicated, I think, around the deed for the property, which was gifted to the town, which I believe states it has to be a municipal use. I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me on any of this. But the town has other space needs as well, in terms of could be potential office space because of some constrictions at Town Hall. We're looking at ways we might be able to help out the Council on Aging, who are looking for more space for their respite care program. We haven't evaluated that fully, but that's something that's on the table. So over the course of the next few months, we're going to try to vet some of these options and ultimately present a plan, both short and long term, for the building at the fall town meeting, so that the town can see what the short and long term future is for the building. There's a lot of options. There's a gazillion options, but we feel it's an asset. We feel it's something that could be reused. It just doesn't lend itself to being reused as a school, as a modern school, as easily, which is what we came to in our conclusion when we decided that that was not an option that we thought we would pursue. So I hope that answers your question, Pat.
Mike, just one of the
Go ahead.
things as an outside observer of that building, that was originally the Medfield High School, right? And it became the middle school. And I think it's had an interesting lifetime. But I think as kids get older and as educational use changes, you realize that the way that the building is laid out isn't necessarily aligned with with a lot of the project-based learning or other learning opportunities that you expect from 21st century schools. So it's just a little anecdote.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. That's excellent point. All right, moving on. Next question. I have Steve Lewis from 57 Millbrook Road, and he asks, what are the projected costs for the upkeep and maintenance of this new school in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? What can taxpayers expect to get billed for in the future with the new school? Steve, I don't have those numbers in front of me in terms of operations and maintenance. So I will try to get back to you if I'll talk to Owen about getting the email list from this Zoom and respond back to you. What I can tell you is that we definitely are looking at all of that as part of this project. The MSBA requires that as we do our budgets, and they look at operational costs as well, just to make sure that we're being fully transparent on all of that. And I can tell you that we're doing our best to keep those to a minimum, but there will be some increase in operational costs because it's a larger building, and it will have some things that the Dale Street School doesn't have right now. For instance, back then schools weren't cooled, and so they've certainly added that with some window units and things like that, but in current, especially unfortunately with climate change, like buildings, schools are now used, they have much higher cooling seasons, longer cooling seasons than they used to. And so that alone does increase some of the operational cost. So I will follow up on that with the schools because they project those, and try to get those emailed out to you. But I don't have that in front of me. I apologize. But it's an excellent question.
One of the things to include, so the mechanical engineers that we're working with have done a life cycle cost analysis. And again, one of the awkward things about presentations like this is that we're showing you as we're doing the work. So we don't have all the final information to be able to share. But one of the analyses that was done was a comparison of different heating systems and what is the initial cost and what is the operational cost. And they look at that over a span of 30 to 50 years. The MSBA expects this building to be functional for 50 years. That's their designed lifespan. In many cases, and frankly, you would hope that this actually lasts more than 50 years in Medfield. Yeah. But looking at ways in which some of the selections of systems we have today can bring annualized savings down the road. So that's a fantastic question. And you should expect to have those numbers from us. O&M is a little bit more difficult. And I think that gets at sort of how the building's maintained. But I think we can talk as architects and engineers about some of the initial and operational costs of the building systems.
Great. Thanks, Emily. All right, next question is from Jenny Kin. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, 6 Carmen Circle. Can Mr. Grenham address the belief that Dale should stay at Dale for independence, for walking downtown on half days, and the item and that item is more important than all the other benefits of the new location? Steve, you want to respond to that?
I sure will. And Jenny, thanks for your question. I would say, and I've said this at meetings before, pre-pandemic, I would say that, 90% or so of our kids take the bus on a daily basis. We have a handful of days that are half days that the kids do walk uptown. Sometimes it's a rite of passage. Sometimes I get calls from parents that are very anxious because they don't really feel comfortable letting their kids do that, but feel like they're being pressured in by the other families that are doing it. But what I can tell you is that tomorrow, for instance, we have a half day. So we will have some students, walking uptown, probably a good amount of students walking uptown. I will also tell you that probably multiple times in the last year, we've got calls at the school from businesses, because unfortunately the kids that are uptown, between unfortunately littering and leaving things around, I might get it wrong, but the big white church with the stairs there where sometimes kids hang around right across from Nosh and Grog, that they have that. The other side is I've been asked, multiple times in the last couple of years by Officer Magnello to make comments, which I do at announcements, because a lot of times the kids go uptown, which is a great rite of passage. They're not really schooled that well crossing the street. And a lot of the people within the town that are traveling through aren't aware that there's a half day. And the kids sometimes aren't always, the most responsible crossing streets and stuff like that. And I've witnessed that when I've had to shoot up the town hall for a meeting during a half day. But to answer the bigger part of your question, when I look at kids that are going uptown, anywhere from maybe 4 to 6 times during the course of the year on a half day, I would say that the outdoor educational spots that we have planned for this building at Wheelock far outweigh where kids are going to be able to have 180, or obviously with some weather, we're not 180, but they'll have far more chance to get outside at the building that we'll be at in a great area. I would also say that, I travel that way to school, and I see kids that are walking from that neighborhood, up to the Blake Middle School in the morning and stuff. I know there are sidewalks on that side of town, so that they could always walk up there if they would. But I just think that when I look at this, and I'm just going from just pure numbers pre-pandemic, that other than those half days, there are not kids that walk uptown to there. And in any event, we have Kidsborough that's right over there, and that's right around the corner. And we still have Kidsborough asking if kids can get bused from Dale Street to Kidsborough, and that's only right a stone's throw away. So I just think that the amount of time the kids and teachers would be able to use those outdoor educational spots, and having, as Emily referenced earlier, project-based learning opportunities on the outside would far outweigh, having them walk uptown, 4 to a half dozen times a year.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, and just so we're setting the context, I admittedly, maybe I'm a bad parent, but I let my kids walk uptown. I hope they weren't the ones littering. The distance change to downtown is approximately a little over 2,000 feet. So it's basically, let's call it 8 football fields. I don't think it prevents it from happening. There's still plenty of sidewalks, and it's a perfectly safe route. So I don't see it that it prevents that from happening. It is a little bit longer, but I know, 2,000 linear feet is something that my kids wouldn't have any problem walking. But, it's not something that we completely dismissed, that we'd factored it in. But as Steve noted, the educational benefits far outweighed it in our minds, and at least in our decision-making process. And we recognize that not everybody may hold that same weight, and they may see that as something that's more important than some of the other benefits that we've noted. But that's, ultimately, I don't think there's any project that, will gain unanimous support. So we just have to put forth what we think is the best one.
And Mike, if I could just jump into, I want to make it clear too, that we're not getting calls every day on half days with that, but it is something, just in the spirit of being transparent, that some of those calls have come within the last year or so that I didn't really recognize in the first couple. So again, there are benefits for kids walking uptown, being independent and such, because again, those are ages. I have kids that are just a little bit older than that, so I know that age group very well. But again, I just wanted to put everything on the table. And I think that looking at that type of stuff, I think kids can still walk uptown and do that type of stuff from where they are, but those educational benefits. But I want to make sure that the kids at Dale Street are absolutely fantastic. But I do notice that sometimes even the middle school kids that are behind Dale Street, sometimes we come back on a Monday and, there's just a lot to pick up, because it happens like that sometimes. So I get it. I see it with the kids eating outside with their teachers now, that sometimes trash just gets left behind, not always maliciously, but it was just one of the things I thought would be poignant to bring out. But I don't want to cast a brush over all the, Dale Street kids, because that's not fair.
Thanks, Steve. All right. So right now, what I would like to do, I do have one more question in the chat, but it's a sort of a follow-up from Marla, who I've answered a bunch of questions on, and I will get to that question, Marla. But what I'd like to do, since we do have a good number of people here, and some, I don't recognize all the names, so they may be new to this, this project in general. What I'd like to do is I'm going to throw up the presentation that Arrow Street put together for the school building committee we had last night, just to give people a little bit of background on the project, and it may help to stimulate even further questions. So this is just a sort of a quick rendering of the front as their title sheet, but we'll get a little bit into it. And these are some of the things that Arrow Street is working on right now. That's an old plan. This is the current plan. So this is the current building plan for the project. And essentially it's, and I'll try not to butcher it, Tina and Emily, but I'll walk the town through it. It's color coded, and what you'll see is basically we have sort of a more private education wing that's really has to do with the classrooms and some special education spaces centered around a learning stair. And this is a learning stair where multiple classes may be able to gather with presentations on the wall that connects the first floor and the second floor. This is just the first floor, but this, if you picture this sort of same setup upstairs, is basically very similar. This front section entire front section is more of a single to a story and a half height. But this contains more of the community type spaces and public spaces, and the school administration. So the school administration is right by the front entry, and that includes the nurse's office, the principal's office, guidance, etc., psychology, and then flanking the front entrance is what we're calling the arts wing. So this is where music spaces, the band space, the art room, and then the media center, which at least back when I was in school, it was called the library, but these days it's called the media center because books are becoming more and more obsolete, unfortunately. But the media center and the makerspace, which is part of the media center, which is another big program that Dale Street has that's been very successful. And then next on this side in orange is what we call in the business a cafetorium, which is basically a way elementary schools generally don't have a full auditorium, but what they do have is a stage and the cafeteria that could be where the tables are movable, and that could be used for music performances or theater or something like that. And then the kitchen and servery that would be adjacent to that, with some small lunch breakout rooms where not every kid likes to be in a huge crowd like that, so we provide opportunities for them to break out into more isolated spaces. And then over here we have the gymnasium. What's in gray is mostly support space, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, toilets, things like that. And then the occupational therapy and physical therapy space, highlighted in pink here. So it sort of gives you a general understanding of how the building's laying out, and what it is creating, which you'll see a little bit more on the site plan, is sort of these interesting courtyards where the cafeteria will spill out over into these courtyards for recess, and they can be used for PE, outdoor PE programs, etc. So let me go to
Just to give a little insight to the color codes, it has to do with the way that the MSBA codes different spaces. Just put it there. And anything that's shown in purple is special education. So one of the things that is a significant upgrade to this building is making sure that there is adequate space for special education so that services can be held at Dale, and can be done, or can be held at the new elementary school, to support the population.
So one of the other big things that this town has been lacking is basketball court space. A lot of our even our in-town teams have to travel for practice outside because there's just not enough space in town. So by making this, the gymnasium the way we have it, it would allow us to even potentially do 2 courts at a smaller size, or a single full-size court at the high school size. So we could keep a lot of those teams and that would also provide some rental income, because Medfield youth basketball would pay to rent those courts, as well as potentially some adult leagues or things like that. So in practice, the gymnasium will hopefully become really a community asset, not just the schools, but and we're designing it such that this sort of wing could be easily isolated on the weekends, so people aren't wandering off in through the school. All right. Arrow Street is developing some of the interior design concepts, and I won't go into too much detail around this. It's still pretty early, but they're sort of looking for inspiration. One of the things that is unique to Medfield is we all love our electric time clocks, and to see them all around the world, it really kind of hits home when you're wandering around some foreign place and, hey, look, there's an electric time clock from Medfield. But and Tom Erb, the owner of Electric Time, has graciously donated a clock for this. We haven't decided how we're going to use that fully yet, but it kind of became an inspiration to the design team on really how time and music work together. Music is another big program for the schools, for Dale Street, and with rhythm and things like that, time and music are intertwined. So I thought this was an amazing concept, and I'm really looking forward to see how it executes. But you can sort of see how they are looking at, say, guitar frets and how that might integrate into a tile pattern, or sound waves, how they might integrate into a floor pattern, or for instance, music, keyboard keys, and how that might integrate into some of the 3-dimensional space.
So I'd say, just as a little thing, it's
Please.
one of the great things about working on schools is that they're happy places, right? And it's always fun to figure out ways in which we can bring joy and a sense of belonging to schools. So you want to make sure that they're welcoming, but also have a little bit of a sense of humor or opportunity for kids to discover things about the environment that they spend so much time in. So it helps us to be able to have themes like music and time to be able to reinforce and bring some of that connectivity.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in at any point, Emily.
You're doing a great job.
I'm trying to just summarize that. Thank you. And Steve too, if from your perspective as the principal, don't hesitate to cut me off and interject if you need to. So anyway,
I will, Mike.
All right. And then, this is also, how time and music may integrate into other elements, like this is showing like an outdoor sundial where the kids actually can sort of be part of the sundial. I thought that was a really interesting image. And then how, just from a color perspective, sort of looking at seasons and time. And so I think that was a really nicely done presentation. We just got this last night, and really looking forward to see how that translates into the project. And then the other thing that Arrow Street does a lot of is these environmental graphics, whether it's introducing core values, educational quotes, or even just simple welcome signs. I think this is a great way to really engage the kids and make the building about learning. This one at King Open, which spent, or I should say that decided to go net zero, which is something that we're pursuing. They put some educational graphics on the wall just about, how we can help with climate change by unplugging devices, things like that. So, and this was something that they did in Harvard, Mass. We were able to tour this with some of the administration, and this was a great, a really nice project, really well done by Arrow Street. This is going to be opening soon.
Next week.
Next week. But you can see how they integrated some of these graphics where they, you know, just are able to identify classrooms by using different flora and fauna, you know, and then having this this is actually a multi-story height graphic that sort of shows how Harvard connects to the rest of the world. So really interesting ways to use the building as a learning tool, even informally and outside of the normal education curriculum. We won't get into too much into materials. This is just how we are looking at, you know, flooring and ceilings and wall materials, et cetera, and how that'll play out in different spaces. But then also I really wanted to show just sort of, you know, this seems to be a misconception about how this building will sit on the site. And I just want to make sure we were clear on that. This is basically, this is the existing field behind the Wheelock School. There is a divider right now, which runs right about here of some trees, unfortunately, that have been heavily damaged. That sort of separate the field area, which we all know off to the side here. So this really is just encompassed by that main field directly behind the school. We are able to save the softball field, which you can't see here, but there's a softball field here and here. Those will both be preserved. So it's only really this soccer field that will be replaced, which is, you sort of see the corner of that here. But just to orient yourself, this is Elm Street here. And as part of this, and one of the reasons why this project is a little bit more expensive is we are fixing some issues with Wheelock as well, and kind of creating a better site for parent drop-off and bus drop-off. And so this would be the sort of the parent drop-off loop and parking for the Wheelock School. So we would clean all that up. And then in a new bus drop-off loop here where we would then be able to, currently all of our buses stop at all 3 schools. If this project gets approved, we would only need them to stop at 2 locations. So this would be a single location where kids would get off to go to Wheelock or the new school. And then the parent drop-off would occur down this way, backing out, and then parking for the new school here and here. And then, as I mentioned, the existing soccer fields. So currently, there's only a small area outside of that field that we would be affecting. That's really kind of this area and the new field. But the school is really designed to be tight up against the Wheelock building so that we could have that close collaboration, and that could be a synergy between the 2 schools. And then just for reference, that's the existing map structure there. So we do need to have some further discussions with MAP about, you know, what their needs would be over here, but they do have an existing structure there that probably wouldn't be enough for them, but we would need to look at how we could integrate that into the school. And just looking at it from the other angle, this probably gives you a better view. Again, existing Wheelock School, Elm Street to the bottom now. These are all existing trees, and we would be replacing this parking lot and drop-off loop for Wheelock, new bus loop for both buildings, and then a new parent access along that wooded land that exists today. So really there's some brush and a few small trees in this zone where we'd be replacing with a new field. These are all existing fields here. And then there is a small run of trees that run along here out to that separate the existing field from the larger existing fields. And so those would go away, and then we would create this kind of new campus feel. And then off to this side, this is that new walking path that that the school would use for their walking classrooms and things like that, which to me, I love that idea of a walking classroom. Steve or Emily, any thoughts before I jump back to questions and answers?
No, I think you did a really good job of explaining it. And I think, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just going to say, Mike, getting back to the original slide that you had up there, it's just really exciting because I think as people know now, that our music, as you referenced earlier, is such a great program. And again, it starts early in kindergarten, but the instruments start in 4th grade. And right now, trying to find spaces for them. So I think that Arrow Street, under the direction of our music department, as they had multiple meetings with them, have designed just wonderful spaces to allow them to, again, just be themselves and not be looking for spaces. Can we go here, or how can we fit into this space? So, and again, the acoustics on top of that is just an added bonus. We take the space first, and then the acoustics are great. So just so many wonderful things there. Just really, really exciting. So, kudos to the design team, and also, appreciate and want to thank them for listening to the teachers as they had multiple meetings with each contingent, whether classroom teachers, special education, teaching, assistants, music, wellness, all of that. So it's been great.
I think a side note was I have a greater appreciation for hybrid teaching after doing hybrid programming meetings with your staff. They're really amazing.
I would concur.
All right, so I think, let's see, was there anything? No, that's just, oh, well, we might as well discuss it since I know it's been claimed. In terms of, people have asked about the well protection district, and I've tried to clear it up as much as possible. And I know some people may not like the answer, but the fact is that this project doesn't pose a significant risk to our well protection. You can see where they're located to the southeast of the site. And actually, the town recently just mapped out exactly where the well protection district ends. And you can see that right now, the school building is just touching it on a little corner. This would be where the new school would be located. But regardless, we wouldn't change how we would design this no matter where it was in anywhere else in the town. Obviously, we can't get within this 400-foot no construction zone. But a building like this that's designed to current code, which is all monitored by Mass DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, as well as our town bylaws, there's absolutely nothing that we have to do to change this building because of its location. So I don't know why that seems to be a sticking issue. I get, the concern. We certainly wouldn't want to the town doesn't want to contaminate its own drinking water. So I don't think we would be putting this forward if that were even on the table. So hopefully that can clear some of that up, but it may not. One other thing to note, this yellow line is also what's called the Archaeological Protection District. And what this is an area that's been identified in town as being potentially sensitive due to archaeological artifacts that have been found. So we did a survey. We had a professional archaeological laboratory firm come and do a survey of the areas that are affected by the project, and they found no significant archaeological resources. So that's another thing that I know people have been concerned about, but it's been confirmed now that that won't be an issue. So that's another good thing to get past. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing now, and I will jump back to Q&A, and I'm hoping at least some of that helped to stir some more questions. I would like to remind people, I've had to put a couple reminders in the chat, but when you're asking a question, please put your name and address in the Q&A. We don't answer anonymous questions. If this were a public meeting, you would have to state your name and address when addressing, the Board of Selectmen or anything like that. So we try to maintain that. We recognize that, we want to make sure we know who we're talking to. You obviously know who you're talking to. So please put your name and address into the questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to skip it. All right. So Marla's question, I appreciate her patience while we did get through that, but she did have another follow-up question. And she asked, what was the estimate? What estimate is the cost of maintaining Dale without tenants until decisions are made? So the idea, the current thinking that we have is that it wouldn't sit there empty. If this project gets approved in the fall, it would proceed through design and then eventually construction, and that would be an additional 3-year process. So we would have time to sort out, get all our ducks in a row for when the building would be vacated in 2024. So the idea is that we wouldn't need to maintain the empty building while we discuss options. We're trying to get to a point where we can transition Parks and Rec and potentially more tenants into that building with nominal upgrades. So we don't have final answers on that. We're still working with the Parks and Rec crew to see what that might look like on their end. And again, we will have more answers for you over the course of the summer and into the fall as we prepare for town meeting. All right, Jenny Kin, 6 Carmen Circle, what is the plan for MAP at the new location? As I noted in the quick presentation, the current MAP building stays. And we do need to have a conversation with MAP about what their needs may be and how we might be able to help. But the intention is that MAP is still fully integrated into the program here. Steve, I don't know, maybe you can chime in a little bit. You're more tied into the relationship with MAP, but I believe, our goal is to maintain that relationship and keep that moving forward with this new school.
Yeah, I would agree. We have a great relationship right now with MAP. We have a series, obviously, of our kids that are over there. I know Jeff has been in discussions with them, and that those are ongoing. But I believe everything would point to seeing what we can do. Obviously, there's a MAP building. Each one of our schools is has an attachment with MAP, and I would fully expect that to continue in some capacity.
All right, thanks, Steve. Okay, next question will be will there be a playground at the new school, and what happens to the current playground at Wheelock? Good question. The answer is yes, there will be a new playground for the 4th and 5th grade. The existing Wheelock playground would stay. We would still maintain them as separate. Again, for recesses and things like that, rather than getting all the kids combined into one space, which is harder to control, we would still be keeping those groups separate during those sort of mass, craziness that is an elementary school recess. However, there are opportunities again to bring the smaller groups and classes together for things like the Victory Garden, etc. But the intention is to put in a new play area, and I believe there's a basketball court also in there. Tina,
Do you have the Terra Inc. site plan? If not, we can put it up.
Not handy, so maybe you can.
I can share if you've, let me see if I have permission to. I can share my screen to.
Let me make sure you have permission. There you go. Should be all set.
Okay, great. Find it here. Okay.
Sometimes it's helpful just to have a visual.
Yeah, you can see it, I think. Yeah, so as Mike was saying, the playground is just south of the new elementary school. It's right here. So you can see outdoor play area, playground. There's a basketball court, as Mike had mentioned. So there'll be hard surfaces. So kids that play Foursquare or other types of games, there's plenty of space for that. And you'll see that this is the walking path that also Mike had mentioned, but there's also outdoor classrooms. So outdoor classrooms where if it's during recess, there's one nearby that kids can gather and play, but also during classroom times, teachers can bring them out here for an outdoor lesson.
And then highlighting the existing Wheelock playgrounds would be good. Yeah.
Right, yep, right over here, this is existing to remain, and there's existing swing sets that's also adjacent to that will remain.
That's perfect. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
All right, I hope that answers your question, Steve. All right, I have a follow-up question from Steve Lewis at 57 Millbrook. Has the project team considered a gift/donation for naming rights for this school?
And I think there's also a follow-up on that one. This could be an additional revenue source for ongoing maintenance costs of the new school.
Oh, I see that. Thank you. Skip ahead. This could be additional revenue sources. I don't know that we haven't explored it, to be frank. No, we have not explored that as of yet. I don't know the logistics around that. I would need to talk to the town and town council about what that might look like. I don't know, Tim, Tim or Emily, have you ever had any experience with that?
I think it's a school committee decision, first of all, about naming rights, about virtually any of the spaces, but it certainly wouldn't be something, we would get into this early in the process. I mean, I think if it will come up. I mean, it often does. I mean, whether there's donations or it's just memorializing somebody or something, but I'm sure it will come up in the future.
Yeah, I think the reason why it hasn't come up now is it doesn't seem to make sense to go down that path until we know that the town approves of the project and is willing to pay for it. And then we would, I think, look at the school, as Tim noted, the school committee would then need to take up what that might look like. So
and we do have to be mindful that the MSBA rules are the donations kind of get taken off the grant. So, so it's not proven historically to be a great source of where people go for extra funding.
Right.
We'll give you an example of what I've seen on previous projects to Tim's point. Sometimes there are things that are added after the building has opened, like a scoreboard or something like that, that have been donation opportunities.
Yeah, that's usually the better play.
Okay. Next question I have is from Steve Cole, 18 Hatters Hill. Will there be a playground at the new school? Actually, I think we just answered that. Great. It was just a repeat. Apologies. Maybe reformatted. Okay. Next question from Martha Festa, 16 Quail Run. And she asked, can the reuse of Dale for offices / recreation be done without significant mandatory expense, building and fire code upgrades as suggested in a mailer that went out? I'm not sure what the mailer is in that context or which one you're referring to.
Mike, I might give you a little bit of context.
Okay.
So there's been 2 questions that are in the chat and not in the Q&A.
Okay.
So Ms. Festa was one of the earlier questions that I think you had needed a name and address for. So that might give you context to that.
Okay, so it states that a Dale at Dale flyer says, quote, a change of use at Dale triggers mandatory expensive building and fire code upgrades. Our reuse of Dale for offices / recreation was estimated at $18 million in 2017. Is this consistent with the building school committee's finding on the topic? So again, we don't have all the answers. We're still exploring it. What we're trying to do, and we think we can, but we need to get confirmation and have some conversations with the building inspector, et cetera, is to try to get him to determine that as a continuing use and we're just reusing it for Parks and Rec. And that wouldn't trigger the upgrades that that flyer alludes to. So there are thresholds within the code that once you start to renovate a building, you can do only so much before you have to bring the entire building up to current codes, and that includes structural codes, energy codes, and a lot of other things that $18 million that was quoted is basically a full code upgrade. But we believe that we can do minor renovations do that without triggering those numbers. But we need to get that finalized, and we're going to be spending the summer preparing for that. And we've already started the process to, for those that don't know, the Parks and Rec department had secured a feasibility study money for themselves when they were looking at a new building. They've hired an architect that they're working with. They put that on pause after the pandemic broke out. So what the building committee has done is we've asked them to work with their architect to look at the building and figure out what portions of it they would use and how they would use it, and then determine what I've pushed hard on them is determine the absolute minimum renovation costs that would be needed. The goal is to get it hopefully down to zero, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we do have also some funds that are left over from the public safety building. We have, I believe it's $600,000 or $700,000 by bringing that project in under budget that could potentially be applied to aid in that move, and or used to potentially demolish the FAF building, which again is in our eyes well past its useful life. So we're still exploring that, and so I apologize if I don't have a final answer for you on it tonight. But again, we're focused on a fall town meeting where this will be presented, and we expect to have answers on that before then. So thanks for your patience on that. And I hope I answered that question. Looks like there's another question in the chat instead of the Q&A, so I'll answer that one as well. Kevin Arthur, 2 Trailside Road. What is the capacity of the current Dale Street School? What is the capacity of the proposed replacement? And what is the current enrollment at Dale Street School? So in terms of, quite frankly, in terms of capacity, we probably are exceeding that. I would imagine the current Dale Street School, where, you know, I know there's some classes that are even taught in the hallways because we just don't have the space. So I think we've exceeded the capacity. I don't know exactly what the capacity is of the existing school, but it's fairly clear, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's fairly clear that we've exceeded it. The capacity of the proposed replacement in terms of enrollment, the MSBA and the town started this project off, and the MSBA's projections are for a maximum growth of 507 to up to 575 students for the 2 classes. And what they've done is they take a hard look at the demographics of Medfield, and they make their projections about where they think growth will be, bearing in mind as Emily stated, their desire that these buildings last a minimum of 50 years. So it's really hard to project that, but that's where they landed, and we're basically bound to that if we want their participation, and the 17 or 18 million dollars that come along with it. So this building would have growth built in. The current enrollment at Dale Street is just, I believe, around 400, correct, Steve?
Yes, that's correct, Mike. Right now, we're just about 400. Obviously, a little different because we have cohort D involved as well. But yeah, through my tenure there, it's been anywhere from 180 to 197 or so with each grade level.
Yeah.
I think from the MS, I was just going to add,
go
from
ahead.
the MSBA standpoint, they don't want to commit funds for a new building that's not the appropriate size. So they actually take a lot of care with their numbers for the enrollment. They have had districts where it's undersized at opening, and then a new addition has to be built, and you know, that they want to avoid that as much as possible.
And it's really interesting, as I have to say, from being part of this process. You know, Tim and I work with the MSBA and on our professional lives, and Tim, you can probably chime in more on this, but usually the opposite occurs, where the towns are arguing for more enrollment because they want, you know, the most they can get that the state will support. In this case, the MSBA actually thought that our numbers were too low and asked and basically put their numbers out there as being much higher. And they explained sort of some of their reasoning behind it. And it's very complicated and technical, so I won't get into it too much detail, but I have to say that most of the time towns are arguing with the MSBA for more enrollment, that they want to be able to build in the growth. So it was definitely a unique situation for us, but I don't know if Tim, if you want to share any of your
Well,
experience.
I would just say, I mean, I think we did go back to them because we did feel, remember, they're looking out 10 years and it's
20, they actually went 20.
20 years. So it's actually very, you can't really predict what's going to happen in 20 years. So they have to be, there's a certain level of speculation that goes on. We did do, as Mike mentioned, the Hopkinton Elementary School, which is a early education school. And in the middle of that project, and Hopkinton had actually tried to get the MSBA to go higher in their enrollment, but they stayed at their projection. And in the middle of it, it was quite clear that it was going to be undersized when it opened. And we went to the MSBA with Hopkinton, and they agreed to allow us to add in capacity for to build in 4 more classrooms, basically, to give it more capacity. And, that wasn't paid. The MSBA said, you can do that, which is not a given, but they didn't offer any reimbursement for it. So, I think they want to be prudent to make sure that the school is going to be sufficiently sized when it opens, but also looking down, like, you said 20 years, but I think even, you look down 10 years, they just want to make sure they don't have a town has to add on at its own funds for a school later on.
And I will say, the MSBA is not in the business of building schools that are oversized.
They don't want to give the extra grant if they
Right.
can.
Right. So, they're, especially after they reformed, given the controversies around Newton North and things, for people who have followed any of that history, there's probably not many here, but, they're basically, they want to make sure that towns are being economical and financially conservative. So it's not in their interest to be pushing forth buildings that are oversized. So they stand by their projections. We asked if maybe we could meet in the middle somewhere, and they said that would necessitate sort of starting over. So we weren't comfortable with that. We have a commitment, or not a commitment yet, but they have us in their program and fully engaged, and we're estimating it's going to be about a $17 or $18 million grant, which I think is vital to success for this project, because I just don't see this town being able to pursue anything like this on their own. All right, so that.
There's been a hand up. I don't know if you entertained
Yeah,
those.
so Susan Sokol has her hand up. Susan, if you could just pop either your name and address into the Q&A if you'd like to speak, or throw your question in there. I'm happy to answer that. Or maybe it was just an accident, I don't know.
Mike, while we're waiting for that, I did see something in there about the perception about the traffic on South Street and what that might be. So I travel that street as well. I don't disagree. I think people travel fast on that road, and being out at arrival and dismissal every day, I think North Street is the same thing, unfortunately. And it surprises me because you have a police station right there, but some people just are in a rush to get places. But I definitely agree. South Street, people can travel fast on that road. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of roads where people probably exceed the speed limit in Medfield, no doubt about that. What I can tell you is that we're hoping to help that a little bit, because the current plan is to make the intersection at Elm and South a 3-way stop. And so the normal traffic that sort of flies down South Street, at the very least, would have an additional stopping point, and would be required to stop at that point in all directions. So we're hopeful that helps with the situation, but yes, I fully recognize that that people don't always obey the speed limits. That's why we have that solar radar sign that you see outside the high school to remind people that they're speeding. So we'll give a couple more minutes if people want to throw in more questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up, but we'll give a couple more minutes for anyone who might be still thinking about potential questions. Just I'll outline for people sort of next steps, just while, since we have such a good audience here. Basically we're focused on a fall special town meeting. A project of this scale and cost deserves its own special town meeting. It deserves that kind of commitment of time and answering of all these kind of great questions. So that's currently targeted for the fall. We haven't set a date yet for when that'll occur. Obviously over the summer, we'll be doing more community forums like this and making sure that we have more opportunities to answer these questions before then. And as we get more information, I know the disposition of the Dale Street School is a key one. Tax impact is another key one. So we will be doing more community forums to be able to disseminate that information. But the ultimate milestone right now for us is a special town meeting in the fall. And for those who may be new to this process, in order to borrow the funds, it's what's called a debt exclusion, and it requires a 2/3 supermajority at a special town meeting. So it's a very high bar to get over, and probably should be given the gravity of the request here. And so that's the sort of biggest hurdle, and then it's followed up by a town ballot vote that is a simple majority vote. Bear that in mind. We'll be looking for that. We'll have plenty of time, hopefully, to answer all your questions between now and then. But that's sort of the major next steps. Internally, for the design team and for the SBC, we're doing a round of cost estimating right now, so we should have updated numbers on what the project will cost. We'll certainly, look at those numbers hard and make sure we're making smart decisions about what we're spending our money on, and then we'll be able to release more information on that. So look for that probably in June, and then ultimately, then before the special town meeting, the submission goes to the MSBA for their review. Make sure we have all their comments before the town votes on it. So it looks like we got another question popped up from Pat Casey, 29 South. Would a grant be available to the town if we elected to rehab Dale Street? I am unaware of any grant that would help offset that. It's not on the historical register. It's not really deemed a historical building. I don't know of any grant program that would offset some of our costs for that. I don't know if Tim or Emily, have you seen any other town apply for some sort of grant for a reuse project?
No, but I mean, I don't think there's any grant that I've ever heard of in our in our work, doing a lot of municipal work. I think, I'm not sure if Pat's not getting at is the grant, is the MSBA willing to provide that grant, which of course we looked at
Yes.
that ad reno option, and for a number of reasons, we didn't go there.
Correct. So yes, so just in terms of that, and I don't know if that's what Pat was referring to, but we can address it either way. Yes, the MSBA would participate in that. They actually do provide an additional incentive to reuse schools when possible. But even factoring in a larger grant from the MSBA, it still turned out to be more expensive and more compromised from the educational programming perspective. So that's why we chose not to pursue it. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, and this was not a deciding factor, but one of the things that is complicating with reusing the existing building is that kids currently go to school there, right? And so you'd need to find alternate locations for them to go that would be educationally that would
Consistent.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Consistent.
And also there's also some logistics. You just have to think about swing space for construction, but also where the kids go and what's that educational quality while they are going to school on an active construction site. So I think,
Right.
that factors into it as well.
Well, especially since it's a grade 4 to 5, the kids who that would be in the school during this construction project would never attend school at Dale. They pretty much would be in swing space if you're in, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be mixed because it would be phased,
Right.
obviously, over time. But I mean, boiling it down to, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. However, when we looked at it, there were a lot of other factors that made it a less desirable choice for us, and for the educational benefits just far outweighed the benefits of it being the status quo. We get, change is hard. I'm certainly not going to lie about that. Change is hard. We're proposing something that's different, and it's a different way that Medfield provides education. But for us, it's an opportunity. The way we see this is an opportunity for us to kind of fix some things in terms of how we give public education to our students, and improve it. And to us, that was the most worthwhile thing. And it certainly, it's easier sometimes for people to accept something that they're used to, and renovating it in place, is a lot easier for people to visualize because they know where it is, they're used to going there. But for us, the educational benefits of being able to have 4 consecutive years on a single site, and the benefits of being able to share staff and share spaces across those 4 consecutive years, to us far outweighs any of the other benefits of the ad reno scheme. So I hope that answers your question, Pat, but if not, please certainly follow up with more. All right, I have a question from Kevin Arthur. Kevin, could you just provide your address?
Kevin was on the 2 Trail side.
Oh.
In the
Oh.
chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's on the, okay. Thank you, Tim. What is the cost impact of the net zero emissions plan? Okay. So the net zero goals we're pursuing is a net zero energy goal. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means, and then I'll address the cost comment. Essentially what net zero is, for those that may not have been paying attention, is a goal to first off minimize the amount of energy consumed by a building. And obviously you can't get to zero just by that. Buildings do consume energy. And then you offset that, what the building does consume, with a renewable energy, either on or off site, so that you eventually get to sort of a net zero, that's the term, where the building is both generating its power and consuming it in the same place. And there are even instances where some buildings get to net positive energy. And so in order to do that, and to get away from the emission side of it and the carbon side of it, it basically means going to an all-electric building. And that means getting rid of fossil fuels, like fuel oils and natural gas, et cetera. And obviously with the goal of making sure that we're not increasing climate concerns. So this is something that's becoming more and more. You're going to hear a lot more about it. The state of Massachusetts has just signed legislation to pursue net zero by 2050 with the state of Massachusetts. Some towns have adopted a net zero policy for the town. I think there's actually something on our town meeting from the Energy Committee to adopt a policy like that this year, actually next week on Monday. And they can explain that in more detail, but basically the goal is to get to buildings that don't have emissions from fuel oils, etc. And then going to all electric, it allows us to generate power for the building through the use of photovoltaics, which you'll see behind me on the roof there. And so that's a renewable energy source. And the goal is to get to a point where we're providing the power for the building and directly from the site, and not having to purchase power from the grid or to burn any fossil fuels to heat the building.
Can I show a graphic? You mind?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that'll help illustrate that a little bit.
Oh, great. So, so how do you do that? How do you design a building that can do that? Obviously, we need to heat and cool a building. We need to power it. So how do you do that? And again, so the first step is to make sure you're consuming as little as possible. So we make the building envelope tight, make sure we don't have energy loss through, the envelope, making sure that the building is thermally isolated enough so that, as you're providing heat in the winter, that it's not just bleeding out through the windows, etc. So that's the first step, is minimizing the energy that you need for the building. And then the second step is providing that renewable source to offset what you do use. And this gets extremely technical. We did a lot of presentations on this in February and March. And we talked about, how we might do that. And then you look at, there's many different systems that could go into it, but only a few that are efficient enough to get us to a point where we can be net zero. And so we evaluated multiple different ways to do that. The one we chose is what's called a ground source heat pump, or a geothermal well based system. And what this does is basically it cycles water through a series of wells down into the ground. These are closed loop wells. We are neither injecting anything nor extracting anything from the ground. It just circulates the water down through there. So in the winter time, it takes the warmth of the earth that's further down about 600 feet and brings that warmth up to the surface to use to help heat the building. And then the reverse is true in the summertime. It's taking heat from the building as the building warms up and putting that into the earth and cooling it because the earth's core is a lot more consistent temperature than the outdoor air. So using a geothermal system like that, geothermal system is extremely efficient and doesn't take a lot of energy to actually move all of this water, just a few pumps. So that allows the heating and cooling of the building to be highly efficient and ultimately get us to a point where it's low enough that we can generate the electricity needed to support that system, and as well the electrical throughout the building with photovoltaics. And photovoltaics obviously are a renewable energy source that just takes energy from the sun and turns it into electricity. And most people are very familiar with that these days. So that sort of gives you an idea of the net zero. Now, in terms of cost, we chose the geothermal system for a few reasons. Maintenance is one of them. It's a much easier system to maintain, has a longer lifespan because the equipment is mostly a well that's underground and doesn't really require much maintenance at all. It's just the pumps that occasionally need maintenance, which are relatively simple systems. We did evaluate a VRF system, or variable refrigerant flow system, but that requires putting some units on the roof, which when exposed to the elements, they will deteriorate a little quicker, and they have more moving parts and things like that. So this did result in an increase of $1.5 million to the base. But what we did do was a very detailed financial analysis that showed that when you look at the borrowing costs of an additional 1.5 million versus the savings in energy and maintenance, and as well as other things like renewable energy credits and things like that, the cash flow on a year-to-year basis is actually positive. which means that it's actually better to do this than to do the alternatives, because over the course of 30 years, it's a net benefit to the town by reducing those energy costs. And we were very, very conservative in those projections. Matter of fact, I grinded the team pretty hard to make sure we weren't being liberal with those. And I actually think the savings will be far greater than what we showed, largely because you know, the world that we know is moving more and more towards all electric. I mean, you're seeing it with cars, you're seeing it with buildings. And as that happens, the electrical utilities and infrastructure needs to be upgraded to support that, which will lead to higher electrical prices in the future. So I hope that answers your question, but if not, please put a follow-up in there. But the grand scheme of things, the cost impact is, it was 1.5 million to the base, but again, from a cash flow perspective, the town will actually be spending less over the course of the lifespan of the building. So it actually offsets itself.
The only caveat I would have to that, Mike, is that you said, you know, one of the most important things is to have an energy efficient building. A good chunk of that is also user
Yes.
user engagement, right? And so
Absolutely.
part of it will also be working with staff and working with school operations to be able to minimize user load and think about new ways of doing things that you can build the most technical building, right? But you also need to rethink the way you use it. So no coffee machine in every classroom.
Yes, absolutely.
That doesn't happen right now. That was just a bad example. Forgive me.
I would add that, you know, the codes are, the energy codes are moving quickly toward, they're changing again in the next year or two, probably when this gets permitted. And so, you know, we're already going to be halfway there anyways with those compliance with those codes. And of all the projects we're doing now, I'm trying to do the math, but I mean, I think we probably have 10 projects between different types, and they're all either net zero energy or net zero ready. The case of one project which decided not to go either way, they've decided to still put all electric systems in because they see that in the future they're going to need to respond to that probably. And so, you know, it's becoming where, as Mike laid out, I think that the cash flow, which used to be, the payback used to be kind of, you know, 3 years ago was in the decades, is now, you know, even if you took out of it, I think out of account the cash flow aspect of it, it's within a matter of years, really. The payback is much quicker now.
And again, that's just looking at the financial side of it. Obviously, there's much more to, you know, climate change that go beyond just the finances. But as Tim noted, as codes start to require this to address climate change, manufacturers and providers, you know, start to build in efficiencies into these systems and develop them to the point where they become more efficient, and there becomes more competition on the market, which helps drive prices down. I mean, photovoltaics, you know, have gotten so cheap largely because of demand and competition. So as the governments start to require this type of thing, it's only going to get more efficient and help drive the cost down. And if the initial cost then makes sense, you know, it's a no-brainer, because it obviously has a huge impact on the environment in general. Oh, hey, Anna Mae, I guess you're done with school committee.
I am. I was just checking in. I didn't think
Oh,
I'd be beamed over. I was like, I'm on.
No, we've had some great questions. We've got a good audience here. This is great. Though right now the Q&A is empty, so maybe you have a question.
Oh, gosh, it's been overload, right?
Yes, it has. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Anna Mae. I was just, we are, you know, sort of winding down, it seems. You know, if anyone has any last questions before we sign off for the evening, please put them in the Q&A. I just want to thank everybody for coming. This has been a great turnout. If this is something that people think is helpful, I'm willing to do this more and more often as we get between now and the fall town meeting, and make ourselves available. I won't commit that it'll always be the same group. I will try to be consistent face here, but we may cycle in different members and to address different topics as we get closer to town meeting. So, and if there's anything the town wants to specifically focus on for one of these types of Q&A sessions, whether it's tax impact when we have those answers, whether it's the reuse of Dale, anything of those, please feel free to reach out. I know Anna Mae is heading up our communications, so she's always a good point person to funnel in questions.
And we are planning to have these every month.
Right.
So we have a tentative schedule and we'll keep people posted, but absolutely, if you've got a theme, reach out.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't point everyone to a recently and beautifully revamped website. It's based off of the school, Medfield Schools public website. If you go to the Explore tab, there's a link called New Elementary School Project, which links to a plethora of information. If you have any trouble finding something, don't hesitate to reach out. We tried to organize it as much as possible, but recognize there's literally probably well over 10,000 pages of documents in there. So it can be tough to navigate. So if you're looking for specific answers, you can start there if you want to start on your own, or you can reach out and we'll help guide you to the answer. And it looks like Tim Baker put in the chat a link which may help as well.
Now I did. I've originally just sent it to only Emily, but
Oh,
Thanks, Tim.
yeah.
This is great. Good turnout. Thank you. And thank
It
you
was.
folks for doing this tonight.
and thank you for organizing us, Anna Mae.
Oh, it's a
Appreciate it.
team effort, always a team effort.
All right. Well, so seeing as there's no more questions, we'll sign off for the evening and let people go back to their normal lives. And again, thank you all, and we'll hope to be talking more soon.
Thank you.
Good night,
Have a
everyone.
great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Ciao.
night.
Thank you all.